6 o'clock. We are now recording. Welcome. Nice to see most of you in person. And we have a few board members and others joining virtually as well. All right. So on our consent agenda, we've got our previous minutes. Any discussion on the previous minutes?
I didn't know, Mary, if people attending virtually should be listed separately from people attending in person, but I did notice that I'm listed as attending and I was virtual.
Right, I noticed that too, and I think that we have in the past delineated between who was virtual and who was in person, but I don't know how relevant or necessary it is. I'm not sure it warrants any kind of reconfiguration of the minutes, but Morgan, do you have any thoughts on whether we should delineate between who's in person and who's virtual on minutes?
I don't. We could reach out to the SBA and see if they have any.
Okay, I can ask for a little bit of guidance on that, and if they feel like that's an important distinction, we'll kind of do that moving forward. Thanks, Lisa. So any further discussion on the minutes? If not, a motion to approve.
I'll make that motion.
Thank you, and I'll do it by roll since we have a number of people
Lisa, David.
virtual. Kat?
Aye.
Lisa?
Aye.
Miranda?
Aye.
John?
Aye.
Emily?
Aye.
And Mary is an aye. So as far as the prioritization, I do need to make a motion to amend the agenda so that we can have a discussion about our mask policy for our meetings. So that motion on the floor is to add a discussion about masking in the meetings. By roll, Kat?
Aye.
Lisa?
Aye.
Miranda?
Aye.
John? Emily?
Aye.
And Mary is an aye. So that said, we're going to now open the discussion for the board to talk about our masking policy for reasonable and health and safety measures at meetings. We do now, throughout the SU, require masks to be worn in all of our buildings. And we need a distinct policy with regard to the meetings. Any discussion?
I find it reasonable just to continue the policy throughout.
Any further discussion? Are we all in agreement about the need to implement a mask policy for our public meetings? All right, so I'll make that motion that moving forward from tonight's, including tonight's meeting, masks will be required.
Mary.
Yep. Who's that, Kat?
Can you hear me, Mary?
Yeah, now I can hear you, Kat. Uh-oh. Well, let's take a pause just while we figure out the technical side of this. Kat, did you have a comment in that discussion?
I couldn't even hear anything, so can you just repeat what we were discussing?
Oh, certainly. Sorry about that. We are
okay.
we are discussing what our masking policy is going to be for our open public meetings, starting
Okay, no, and that's
effective
totally
tonight,
what
moving forward.
Okay, and that's totally what I heard and what I got. I just wanted to make sure that, yeah.
Absolutely.
Any discussion.
All right, so the motion on the floor is that we will require masks starting tonight, moving forward for all of our public meetings. By roll, Kat?
Aye.
Lisa?
Aye.
Miranda?
Aye.
John? Emily?
Aye.
And Mary is an aye. So that said, I do need to ask the people in our audience to please wear a mask for tonight's meeting. We have them available on the table out there if you did not bring one yourselves. Otherwise, there is a piece of paper on the table with ways to call or Zoom into the meeting.
So you won't be able to speak into the mask.
That is
Hard
correct.
to hear you, actually.
I'm sorry.
Let's go.
Well, you're welcome to come a little closer.
Okay.
And it would be great if you would be willing to abide by the policy we just adopted and put a mask on.
I think we're all set.
All right, so we have no visitors now to recognize. Moving on, we have our school spotlight. Lenny, you're up with your school spotlight.
Before you go to that, you have one possible visitor in
Oh.
Zoom land that came.
Oh, I apologize. And who is the person? I can't see.
Tammy, can you give us your last name and let us know if you're here as a visitor?
I think she's muted. Do you want to let her know that she's muted?
If you're trying to speak, you're on mute.
Yes, my last name is Underwood, and I'm here as a visitor.
Okay,
What's that? I'm sorry.
Tammy Underwood, and she is here under visitor.
Okay, and would she like to comment publicly during our public comment window right now?
We're at the public comment window. Is there anything you'd like to comment on for the board, or are you here for something later in the agenda?
Well, unfortunately, this happened on a night where I am really spread thin, so I'm only going to be able to participate for a few minutes. But I just want to go on record stating that I'm here to support the people that are for mask choice, because this is harming our kids.
She said,
Form.
Can anyone remember what she said?
Yeah, we're trying. Tammy, can you repeat what you just said? It was a little hard to hear you.
Yes, I was planning to be there in person tonight, but I'm spread very thin and I can only participate because I'm going to have to leave for another meeting. But I just want to go on record that I'm support that are fighting for mask choice. Masks don't work. You don't even have to go to medical school to figure that out. And these are harming our kids. This is child abuse.
Okay. Thank you, Tammy.
Thank you, we heard at that time.
Thank you.
Oh, and Tammy, can you please let me know what town you reside in?
Swanton?
You're from Swanton. Okay. Thank you. All right. So, just actually, Lenny, one thing, I realized that I neglected when I made that motion to set, and I suppose we could amend it if we wanted to set a time frame for which we will kind of have this health and safety measure in place for the meetings. So that was my bad in kind of leaving it open-ended, or we can just leave it as it is, and we can certainly revisit it as we move further into the fall and winter and see what the data and the health stats are indicating, and hear what's going on. We'll know more from the AOE likely and other health agencies. People comfortable kind of leaving it as it stands, and then we'll just revisit it when the time is right? Okay. All right, so Lenny, you are up with your school spotlight.
So my school spotlight is actually a joint school spotlight with Rhoda. And I forgot to check in with Caroline, how do I want to go about setting up my presentation? Or mess up everybody else's whole presentation?
And it might be nice to have you on with the mic so everyone can hear.
Do you want to just share it to me?
Yes.
And the Zoom people need the mic to hear it.
Just share it. Okay, so I'm working to share this screen, which has the presentation that Rhoda and I worked on together, and I'll just prompt Morgan every time to change screen. Will that work for you, Morgan?
Yep.
Perfect. Okay, so what we wanted to talk about was our continued work on implementing restorative practices at our collective schools. Rhoda and I have kind of taken similar paths, but different for the two schools that we're at over the course of the last few years, and this coming year, we both have engaged with the Holistic Schools Restorative Project partners in Restorative Change, the name, to kind of further increase and enhance our implementation of restorative practices. So we figured we'd talk to you a little bit about why restorative practices is something we value so much for our schools, and sort of what we've learned and kind of along the journey that we've gone from our initial foray into it to where we are now. So the title of this presentation is The Journey to Creating a Community of Belonging.
Can I stop you for 1 second? I'm wondering if there are two microphones on. We're hearing like an echo effect. It's hard to hear anything that you're saying.
Is that a little bit better? I think what's going to happen. I think what was happening is that the microphone and projection across the entire building was probably causing that echo effect. Does that sound better? Okay, so I'll just speak super loud. I've got the principal voice for it. Okay. So the first question, or first piece of the presentation is talking about why restorative practices, and the phrase that I've been using and I use when I presented this to my teachers is it's one of those universal practices, and I try to be a little poetic, that impacts our school universally. It really does impact every little thing we do. And it's one of those things where it's not just going to happen in math class, it's not just going to happen in PE, it's not just going to happen at lunch or on the bus, it's going to involve all of our interactions human to human throughout the school. And so a little bit of a word doodle thing that we have that I got from our partners for restorative practices is these are kind of key phrases or key words that collectively encompass or try to encompass what it is that we are building and bringing into our school by doing restorative practices. Bringing in, developing respect, encouraging, fostering skills around reflection, repairing, building relationships, increasing engagement, increasing safety, finding times to pause and take that deep breath, enhancing accountability, enhancing awareness, increasing our problem-solving skills, and improving everyone's collective voice and particularly student voice in the school. Next slide. So then the next question is what I kind of spelled on the next few slides is sort of some examples of how restorative practices universally impacts our schools. And the first quote I have there is Think of restorative practices as an emotional foundation upon which all schooling is built. Without that foundation, without meeting and supporting the basic fundamental needs to belong, to feel safe and loved, no one is available to learn or teach. And I'm not going to speak forward, but I'm sure she probably feels the same way. That's a key understanding that I've kind of come to in my years as a teacher and then in my years as a principal is as much as you can have great instruction plans, if you don't have every kid feeling like they belong, those kids are not going to be accessible for learning, and they're going to greatly impact accessibility for everyone else to learn. And so that's sort of been my key foundation of what I really want to develop among all the other things we can do to improve our school. I really believe if we can really greatly increase that sense of belonging for every student, we're going to have a huge impact on student learning. And as I outlined some other ones, it's also going to have a lot of positive impacts on all the other individuals in the school. So one of the things that restorative practices will do is increase equity. Through those weekly and daily community building exercises, we can ensure that every student experiences being seen and heard. Restorative practices also is going to build healthy relationships because those restorative practice processes provide a safe and structured way to develop relationships in schools with students and between students. And what you'll see in these coming slides is how this really perfectly intersects with a lot of those pandemic COVID recovery plans and comprehensive school improvement plans we've all been working on throughout the years. Next slide.
So I went around just this morning and grabbed some pictures of some restorative practices in action. So this is our first grade classroom this morning. They were having a circle and reading together. The teacher is holding a globe ball that they're using as their talking piece, and they're passing it around to each kid and giving them opportunity to just greet each other and start the day as a whole community. Next slide.
Oh, you can skip this slide, that's a duplicate. I didn't run it through my editor. That's okay. So another thing that restorative practices does is it reduces teacher burnout and compassion fatigue. Could you move that a little on so we might be able to walk there, or if it's possible. And if not, you kind of just stand through there. So it's going to reduce teacher burnout and compassion fatigue by creating a greater sense of community and belonging, which creates a self-supporting classroom environment that is human and content-centered, not solely student-centered or teacher-centered. And what I'm really talking about here, we've seen this happen. I have one specific grade, which I've named now, but we had one specific grade that was really struggling to feel successful and have everyone feel comfortable. We had a lot of different behavioral concerns and some other social emotional concerns. And when we started piloting these sort of practices in that classroom, the classroom teacher noticed she had more effective control of the space, but also all the students started feeling like they had more control of the space and felt more safe and secure and comfortable there, and also started gaining skills and how to address when somebody did something that was unexpected and didn't make them feel good, which made them feel even more safe and even more under control. So restorative practices also integrate social emotional learning and mindfulness with practices that develop that emotional literacy and mindful awareness, as well as confidence and skills in empathy, speaking, and listening. And the picture that Rhoda just showed is kind of one of those examples of one of the countless opportunities that restorative practices creates in the school environment where we can help improve students' social emotional skills through really thoughtful and controlled discussions, where they can learn how to deal with and manage their emotions, or learn and deal with problems that they might come up with during the day. And then restorative practices improve school safety, according to a quote from the Center for Disease Control in 2009 research, that school connectedness is the strongest protective factor against school violence and a long list of adverse student behaviors. Restorative practices are one of the most time-effective and efficient ways to develop connectedness in a busy school. And I think that last quote is really powerful, because when we really get to the point of implementing these restorative practices, it's not something that happens at 8:30 in the afternoon, or at 9:30, or at 2 o'clock. It's something we're kind of constantly doing, so we're going to be constantly creating that school connectedness and constantly responding to situations that are very social, emotional, and social learning and increasing students' sense of connectivity.
One more slide, please.
So then I think these are the two last, maybe two more, so don't quote me on that. Restorative practices serves the needs of challenging, marginalized youth. Students with trauma history and poor attachment with caregivers benefit from the structure, safety, transparency, and humanizing effect of restorative practices. And that was kind of one of those really profound things that the teacher and the students and the rest of the school saw when we piloted some of these practices in some of our grades, and we want to bring that in. And that really powerful place of helping students understand that they are loved, that they do belong here, making them really feel that, and then also they may have negative impacts, but we all are going to work together to find a solution to it that's going to be really safe and powerful and effective rather than making students feel shame and outcast. Restorative practices also promotes deeper learning and relevance. And sort of the quote here is that expressing how we feel about topics stimulates deeper thinking about the topic. Neuroscientists have been able to prove that emotion and thinking are inseparable. As one such scientist writes, people think of emotion as getting in the way of cognition, but it doesn't. Emotion steers our thinking. It is a rudder that directs our mind and organizes what we do. And for me, I really do like that quote because I think about how we can allow our emotions, we always have emotions, but we can let our emotions take control of us, or we can leverage our emotions to do productive things. I think we all know those moments when we might be feeling a certain feeling and that takes us away from being productive, or we're feeling a certain feeling and we allow that to motivate us to drive deeper, to work even harder. And that's what the new skills are hoping to build with some of our students. Next slide.
So here's another example. This is a music class, and really, it's a picture to me of that inclusivity, and that you can use this in any subject. And the idea of that deeper thinking, they don't have, you can't really see it in that picture, but they have ukuleles, and we're discussing how to use their ukuleles, how to take care of them, and keep them safe. It's the beginning lesson. And it's just improving that thinking of what they're going to be doing in that class as a whole group and in a way that helps them all know and understand and feel that they are a part of this discussion.
So restorative practices builds capacity and resilience, which I could go on a whole line, like long diatribe about how those are kind of fundamental skills that are cross-cutting in all the things that we do in life beyond just simple academics. But any method of seeking accountability and repair when harm happens requires those involved to have the capacity for the process. Many of today's students lack the emotional resilience to receive feedback constructively, feel the discomfort involved in the repair process, or even be a part of difficult problem-solving conversations. Students need strong relational balance, or need a strong relational balance to do the work of admitting to and repairing harm. And another quote that kind of sums this up is, without love and belonging, nothing constructive can be done with shame. Next slide. This one's a little harder here, but this is sort of saying, okay, so that was kind of big selling point of why we value and see how important and how impactful, how powerful sort of practices can be in our schools. Ro and I took similar but somewhat different paths to get to where we are today, which we're going to talk about in more slides. But when I kind of first learned about this and the potential of sort of practices, I began by collaborating with Franklin Gardell Restorative Justice Center to develop a multi-year implementation plan. I did that in the 2018-2019 year. I realized that was probably way out of my capacity to do, so then I partnered more deeply in 2019-2020 with the FGIRJC for consultation and started to do some professional staff trainings. And then out of that, I realized just a few professional staff trainings was not nearly enough to get the real impact in the skills and create the climate and culture community need for restorative practices. So then last year, I increased that consultation by part of professional development to create a restorative practices leadership team that would help develop and plan out our multi-year implementation process and also provide some staff to lead. But as we'll talk about on the next slide, there was a realization both between the consultant and myself that this sort of wasn't nearly enough to get those effects and impacts that we need in our school.
So Bakersfield started a year before Berkshire. I wasn't there at that time, but I know that they started that year with some consultants coming in and doing some work for the school. The following year, they collaborated with Franklin Grand Isle Restorative Justice Center to develop a multi-year plan, very much like Berkshire did. In 2019-2020, we had a full-time RP coach in the building and some PP staff trainings that were happening. And in 2020-21, we continued that consultation and worked with the leadership team, and we kind of, it was an RP/leadership team, and then continued with a .5 RP coach. But even with having that RP coach in the building, just as Lenny said, there were pieces that we felt were missing and were sometimes being put on that coach. We weren't developing what we needed to sustain that on our own. So that leads us into our next piece. And there's a picture first. You can see the picture of some more. This is a bulletin board that's outside of the main office, and it just says we are building a restorative school. And there are some little pieces about what that is. So, what we have learned. So, schools need systems in place in order to sustain this work. So, there's a lot of system building that needs to happen if we're going to continue to move forward and be able to do this without having an outside agency helping us.
And kind of the way I look at that too is just having some consultative kind of ways to like a plan, but part of that plan is also creating and developing a system that's going to reinforce all the developments that you need. When it comes to teaching and improving mathematics instruction, we have this really great system in place in our SU for how we're going to upload new teachers and get them ready to go, and how we're going to keep improving their learning, and how we're going to adjust any changes. And just having a consultation and a couple staff development is not really enough to create that comprehensive improvement system around the practice that we think we need to have to be effective.
We also realized that we needed that ongoing training, and that new teachers coming on board needed to really be a part of that. We needed to do some onboarding for those teachers every year so that we made sure that they were up to speed with where we all were as a staff. We also have realized there are a lot of schools, not just in Vermont, but around the entire nation that are doing this work, and we can learn from each other. And so we wanted to have partners who had access to some of that work that was going on in other places. We also learned that student leadership is a huge part of this, and we need to have our student voices as a part of the entire process and a part of the systems in order to make this sustainable. And as Lenny had said before, this ties into so much other work that we're already doing. Social emotional learning, equity, mindfulness, multi-tiered systems of support.
And I think something to add to that is what we also learned from me as a principal, I think we agree, is that I don't have nearly enough capacity or bandwidth to really do all this on my own. When I was working with a consultant, I was realizing I'm definitely I love this stuff, and I definitely agree with all of it, but I don't know deep enough to be a great leader or learning around it. And I also don't know well enough to know how to do the scope and sequence for the teachers to learn it and to build it and implement in my school. I really need a really strong expertise to help me. And then another piece I learned, and I think we're really going to add to this too, is we also, that sustainability piece is a really key word here, and continue to lean on consulting and not build up a capacity and system within our school makes us going to be always relying on a specific person for a specific position to do this. So we talked with the people who are consulting builders, is there a better model that can create that sustainability and build that capacity within this, so it's not something that relies on me or a specific person to do it, and so you can create a really clear plan that's actually going to be effective over years.
Just a couple of other examples of this in action. The one with the whiteboard behind it shows a certain prompt that day. Students will be, so that's just
started piloting, the first thing that our teachers were doing was identifying some problems we were seeing. But as they were getting more into the restorative practices process, it was also having the students come up with, here's what I feel like we need to talk about after class. Here's what I'm seeing as struggles. Sometimes A, in their words, to be more effective than coming from the teacher. But B, we might not totally attuned to what is going on and bothering kids and getting in the way. But having the students feel like, I know there's a way to talk about this, I know how to talk about this, I know how to solve the problem, really empowers them to come up with that solution. So negative feedback and negative experiences are festering and growing into something that are really nice. Next slide. So the big question is, how do we create a restorative school that sustains itself over time? How do we make RP more than something we do, but rather who we are and the way we approach all of our work? So answering all these questions is the goal of the Department of Restorative Change. Partnering them in this endeavor makes sense as the next part of this important work.
So this is our expected outcomes for this first year of work with requires some restorative change. So it's a fairly long list, but I think we can do it this year. So we're going to begin setting up the infrastructure for the work, revamp our current restorative practice teams for the new ones, increase school leaders' understanding of restorative approaches, and identify community partners. We're training teachers and staff and in charge RP, which happened already on August 13th. We're going to conduct an assets and needs assessment, which basically will take us through what are we already really doing well, and where are the places that we need to go to next. And from that, we will really get a plan to move forward into what we need for next steps. We will begin to set up evaluation systems to determine those next steps in implementation, professional development needs, program efficacy and fidelity, and to celebrate all we have already done. With our restorative practice teams, we will develop ongoing community coaching plans around restorative practices, understanding and language for all teachers. And we will continue the work started last year on reviewing existing past policies and initiatives through the restorative lens. So we really want to look at everything we do, including our policies and procedures within our school through that lens of restorative practice. We will continue to work on behavior response and review and redesign. And our school leaders will engage in restorative leadership coaching and training around holistic, restorative, graded topics such as anti-racism and trauma-informed practices. And that's the work for this year. Questions?
I'll just comment that is really in-depth and comprehensive, and I'm going to have those off to you for undertaking this, but I think it's really important work. So, thank you.
Yeah, I'll just echo what Lisa said. I'm really excited to see the work you've done and to see what's coming. I'd love to see it in all our schools ultimately. And so this will serve as a great kind of model for what is possible across the rest of the district and throughout the SU. It's excellent, and it's very much of the moment, and it's timely, and it's really critical, and it's incredibly transformative work. So I'll look forward to hearing updates as you get into this year. Thank you so much. So I do want to just acknowledge that we had a visitor come back. Are you interested? I would be happy to. We have ended our public comment window, but I appreciate you coming back and your willingness to follow our policy and wear a mask. And so I can circle back to public comment if you have something you'd like to say to the board. We do have guidelines and kind of parameters for that public comment. It's an open public meeting. It's not a meeting of the public. And that distinction is that we are just here to hear you. You can have 3 minutes. And we just ask that it's a civil discourse, and we appreciate you coming back. And there are microphones up here if you'd like to come closer so we can hear you better. And I do need your name and your town of residence, please. Say one more time.
Cassie Choquette,
Can you spell both of those, your first and your last?
CASSIE,
Yep.
CHOQUETTE.
Okay, perfect. And where do you live, Cassie?
Sheldon.
In Sheldon. Thank you so much.
Am I good?
You are. Please feel free to go.
I was really hoping I wouldn't have to wear a mask for this meeting, but I really feel the need to speak for my kids. It's short and sweet, and I didn't have a whole lot of time to prepare, so it's on the back of the colored page. I'm here to represent my children and the request that this mask mandate be lifted, that it be their choice to breathe freely. I have 3 children, ages 5, 7, and 17. My 5-year-old tells me her mouth sweats and it's too hot. My 7-year-old has an IEP, and he has sensory sensitivities and is doing his best to tolerate it, but he really shouldn't have to. I really feel for him and my other kids struggling with this. They do their best, but of course would rather not. Children should not have to tolerate lack of proper air supply for hours, with some breaks, more now because they can go outside, but less and harder come winter. One example given to me with my daughter was that they will try to open the door and let them run from the school to the fence to try to get some fresh air. And I know the teacher's trying to do her best, but it's just doesn't feel like it's enough. During my daughter's kindergarten orientation, I instantly felt uncomfortable putting the mask on. And like my daughter said, it's hot, and I feel almost claustrophobic as wearing it, and I'm an adult. So I can just imagine how these kids feel. My 17-year-old, he's in his senior year, and for many reasons, masks included, at times would prefer not to go to school, but to be homeschooled. And, there's things there that he likes, that he wants to be a part of, but, school just is not like it was, and it's just not the same. His friend, before I left for this meeting, said his school requires they wear masks during gym class when inside. That to me is, sitting for an extended period of time when inside is hard enough, but physical activity that takes place in gym class, that seems to be asking for something bad to happen. I feel like if some choose to mask their children because they feel it's in their best interest, that's their choice. But those who don't feel their children should wear them because that's what they know is best for them, should also have that choice. It feels like we're slowly losing our freedoms, and our children included, because they really do feel like they have no choice. So. Right here.
Yes, thank you so much, Cassie. Thank you. Okay. So next up, Lynn, you are up with your superintendent's report.
Okay, thank you, Mary.
Can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Okay. So first, I'd like to apologize for not getting a superintendent's report in. I've just returned, I'm partly returned from my leave. I'm able to work virtually right now. hoping to be back the middle of next week. So I'm going to give you a verbal report this month. So in terms of personnel, I'm going to have the principals give their personnel updates when you get to them on the agenda. I don't have anything under students at this time, and I'll just talk a little bit about reopening. So I've been hearing from leaders across the supervisory union that, the first week, I think we're exactly a week in now, has gone quite well in all of our schools. They're focusing heavily on making those connections with students and really trying to reinforce the routines and expectations in the school. In a lot of cases, it's the first time whole groups of students have been back together in quite some time. So they're doing a lot of team building and other activities to get kids excited about being back in school. The students generally appear very happy to be back in school. The leaders are reporting very positive things from students. We definitely still have several people who are in opposition to the mandate of masks in the school, and they have expressed those concerns both at the board level and to me personally. We also are seeing quite a number of people who are expressing a concern that masks might not be enough, that they're pretty passionate about safety measures. And so I think that, one thing I'd like the board to hear is that there are two sides of this conversation, and both positions are equally as passionate about their beliefs around safety. So as you know, from the last year and a half, we take safety very seriously. That responsibility to really focus on the safety of our students and staff is something that I know I don't take lightly, and I know our leaders do not take lightly. So we have, after a week of being in school, we have had 6 positive cases so far across the supervisory union. We have had 5 of those cases present at school while they were infectious. And we currently have 30 students who are quarantining connected to those 6 cases. What we have noticed this year is there's been a shift in the contact tracing protocols. And so our response from the contact tracers, last year our experience was we could learn about a case and we could, work into the night over the weekend to try to navigate through and identify all the close contacts. And we're just experiencing right now, I don't know if it's growing pains or if it's the number of cases that are happening in the state, but a slower response to the contact tracing. So we have had to make some decisions to have students shift while we complete the contact tracing. So we've been able to do it within around 36 hours, I think was the longest it took for us. So I think that, I think we can expect that there will, given the number of close contacts we have and where the virus is at this point, that we're expecting that we will have more cases. We will continue to reinforce safety expectations. I know last year we had a pretty evolved guidance document from the agency that was quite comprehensive in almost every area. And the guidance that we're getting is a lot more minimal this year. So we're having to navigate through what makes the most sense in terms of the mitigation measures that we're putting into place right now. So, some of these, I'm sure that many of you can understand how quickly this shifted. The tide really shifted within the last month in terms of what I thought a month ago and what the reality is right now is quite different. So we have had these last few weeks to try to navigate and figure out a lot of things. We've had to try to figure out how we can safely do food service, how we can manage students in music and PE classes and classrooms and all of those things. So the principals are working incredibly hard to make all of those things as safe as possible. And so our teachers are working incredibly hard. I know I did hear in the visitors comment that she noted that the teachers are really trying to get students to go outside for mask breaks. And I think that's pretty consistent across the organization. I'm seeing a lot of pictures that people are putting out where they have students, whenever they get a chance, they're doing team building and other activities outside as much as they can, because the masks are not required while they're outside. So it's really in a nutshell about, how the start of the year has gone for us. I'm overall pretty pleased with how it's gone. And I think that, just in the conversations, I've just barely started back at work, and in the conversations I've had in the last 2 days with leaders, they seem overwhelmingly pretty happy with how things have gone as well. Is there any questions that any of the board members have about our reopening? Okay. So the other thing on my agenda was a legislative update, and that was a leftover from last month. I don't have anything on the legislative update for this month, and I don't have an other. So I'm a bit shorter than I typically am. Hopefully no one will mind this month.
So we are now doing our principal reports, and so it sounds like Lynn said that the principals may have some additions with hiring info. So first up would be Rhoda with Bakersfield. If you had anything you wanted to add and piggyback on Lynn's.
I don't have hiring, but I do have a resignation.
Okay, and you'll need a motion to accept that resignation?
Yeah.
Okay.
Audrey Gardner, she was hired as an engineer and behavior technician. And she has resigned.
Oh, okay. It sounds as though we may not need a motion on that. Lynn, do we need a motion for that?
Is it the paraeducator?
Yeah.
You do not.
Okay.
It would be just informational for the board.
Okay, great, thank you. And Rhoda, do you have anything else to add to your principal's report?
We're starting soccer. If you weren't sure we're going to have coaches.
Oh, good, nice, good stuff. How about you, Lenny?
Trying to remember which people have been hired, but I know some people have already hired since we last spoke.
I can also roll hiring into next month as well, Mary.
Okay.
If there's anything tonight.
Okay, no problem. Okay. Lenny, do you want Lynn to pick it up next month?
No, well, so we do have an independent coordinator that actually is not the individual left the name there that fits but we do have a planning coordinator, her name is Brianna Paquette, and she will be soon changing her name to Brianna Ryan when she gets here, so we actually registered her as an employee under her assumed name, Brianna Ryan. Megan Westcott was also hired as a paraeducator. And then Katie Gleason was hired on Friday and started her first day on Monday as a paraeducator. So that we have all of our positions filled.
Excellent, that's great. And anything else to add to your report, Lenny, or are you good?
I think I'm good. I'll just add a little bit more. I think for today was our first day of soccer practices for middle school, so we're super excited for that. I did find out that I had scheduled some games with Troy, either Troy or North Troy, at the JP Turf Field. I'm really super excited about that. I don't know if that was an inspiration when we saw the high school daughter playing on there for Richford a couple days ago, but she's really excited. There's going to be kind of a jamboree and a couple of games scheduled at that turf field, so it'll be really exciting and fun for students.
Nice, that's a great field. Awesome.
I didn't know there was a field, so I'm going to go and check it out.
Yeah,
I should just stop at the mountain and walk. That's usually where I'm heading, so I have to calm down.
My husband's very proud of that field.
All right, and we do not have Sandy with us, so Christy, do you have anything additional hires that you wanted to mention or anything further for your report?
In my report, I said we need a middle school girls soccer coach and we don't. So we are fully staffed coach-wise and we started playing 5 to 8, or started conditioning 5 to 8. I do need 2 behavior tests and a therapy.
Still to be hired, you said? Yeah. Okay. Great. All right, thank you. And Morgan, before I move on to you, Lynn has one more piece to talk about.
I did forget this piece, so I apologize. When we made the decision around our nursing staff last year, we were not anticipating that we would be in this place right now. So I would like to recommend to the board that we hire an LPN so that right now we have a half-time nurse who's splitting her time between Bakersfield and Montgomery. And given where we are with the amount of work in contact tracing that's happening, I think it makes sense for us to have a half-time person that can be there when the RN is not there, so that she can delegate some of those things to that to that LPN. So I'm going to ask the board if they would approve a motion to hire an LPN to finish out this year.
I'll make that motion. Any discussion on an LPN to help support the nurse between Montgomery and Bakersfield? It certainly seems warranted, given the climate right now. Emily made that motion. All right, so the motion to hire an LPN by roll: Kat, Lisa, Miranda,
Aye.
John, Emily, and Mary is an aye.
Thank you.
Of course. All right, Morgan, you're up with the money discussion.
Thanks. I'm going to be pretty brief this month. Enjoy it while you can. In 2 months, we'll be starting on the budget process. I'm going to share the screen. I did send a financial report out to the board by email earlier today. It is very similar to the reports that you saw out of your old system, but I just wanted to walk you through it, a refresher for some, and just kind of reorient you to what you're going to be looking at every month. The report that I sent is just the general fund, and it's for expenses through the end of August. If you see that first black bar, that's delineating the fund that we're looking at. For those of you on the SU board, you're going to see reports with many more funds in there, and at some point we may be sharing more at the district level as well. The next breakdown is a section on revenue and then a section on expenses. Those are broken out by the 2 yellow bars. So that first section is going to show you the total of the revenue that we're expecting to take in this year for the general fund, which is your voter approved fund. The column that says adopted budget is the budget that you had approved in March. The column that says current budget is sort of a working budget, and so as we make changes throughout the year, you may see money move from line to line as we realize that we have plant issues that we need to take care of, or if we have savings on staff and we are going to deploy those resources elsewhere. Year-to-date actual is the amount of money we've spent through the end of the month listed above, or on the revenue side, the amount of money that we've received. Encumbrance and revenue is the amount of money that our accounting system already knows that you're planning on paying. So once we pay a teacher once, it knows that you're going to be paying them 25 more checks throughout the year, and it's already counting that amount of money. Variance, the last column, is the difference between what you've spent, what we know you're going to spend, and the working budget or that current budget. Unlike the reports you saw last year, the system that we're using now lists revenue as a positive number. And so basically what that means is in this variance column, wherever you see a negative number, that's a bad thing. And it doesn't matter if it's a revenue or expense. If you look down, the first school that's up under expense is Bakersfield. This report will go through the 4 schools, and then we'll go through the district level costs, which is primarily your tuition payments for your high school kiddos, and then assessments to the supervisory union. Generally, each of your schools is going to have these dozen or so broad categories. So if we just look at direct instruction for Bakersfield, that's basically all the money that you're spending on instructing kids in classrooms. We're planning on spending $1.19 million in Bakersfield. To date, we've spent $13,000, and we know at least for salaries and benefits, we're planning on at least another $857,000. If this was the last day of the year, that $325,000 would be a surplus. The things that are not encumbered are things like your utilities, your school supplies, your bond payments, anything that's not personnel related, but that's going to come up throughout the year. So at this point in the year, we don't really spend a whole lot of time worrying about the variances. If I see something alarming, I talk to the principals and we may make some budget adjustments there. One thing that I want to point you to, and then I'll stop, you'll see that the revenue total up here is 17 million and change. And if we go to the bottom of the report, the expense is a higher number, and it's higher by this $500,000 or so. The reasons for that there are 2 reasons for that. The first is the use of fund balance. In your old accounting system, I was able to game it so it looked like it was a revenue. That's actually not really revenue. It's money that you have sitting in the bank that you're going to use for this budget. And I haven't really figured out a way to get this system to show it that way yet. The other piece of money, which is $150,000, is revenue that we've classified in the general fund in the budgeting process. And the state is now requiring us to classify that as basically a special grant. It's Medicaid reimbursement money. And so similar to the fund balance, I'm trying to figure out a way to game that back into the general fund. The only advantage of that is that it would be nice if your net position for the budget amount was a 0, because that's the reality. If you bring in what we think and you spend what we think, we're in the same position that we had told the voters we were going to be in. I will start talking to you about real numbers probably in your November meeting as we discuss budget and as we start paying some of those high school tuition bills, which is the biggest single chunk of your budget.
And did we have an uptick in our high schoolers for this coming year that exceeds what we had budgeted?
We won't know yet. October 1st is sort of the point in time where people start developing their tuition bills because the kids are settled. Okay. As you know, between NMV and Enosburg-Richford, once those bills come out, your principals and your admin assistants are scrambling to figure out if any of the kids that you've been billed for actually has a parent in Enosburg or Richford. In that case, you don't have to pay for it. The big delta this year is that we are starting to see more tuition bills from Rice, which in the past hadn't been eligible to receive public money for tuition. I think I've gotten 4 so far, and so those are kids we had not planned on, and there may be more coming. They're doing a pretty aggressive marketing scheme. To the extent that they're poaching a kid from Munisburg or Richford, it doesn't impact your budget so much, but to the extent that they're kids who have already been going to Rice and now their parents are able to access tuition money through you, it's money that we hadn't planned on. And unless there are any questions on that, that's all I have for this month.
All right, thanks, Morgan. All right, so that brings us to our board business. Does anyone have immediately an agenda item they'd like to tack on to next month? Obviously, you have time to do that. Doesn't have to be tonight. We do still have a board member vacancy from the town of Bakersfield. So I've been working with Aaron, our current Bakersfield rep, and would like to just encourage anyone from the town of Bakersfield who may be watching this to reach out to me or to Aaron if you have an interest in serving on the board as a Bakersfield representative. Hopefully we will have that position filled for the next meeting. We have our SU board representative report.
Yeah, it was, we talked about the portrait of a grad and moving forward with the next phase of that. We got kind of a summary of the work that had been done and what was next, and we all seem to be in favor of moving toward that next phase. There was some good reporting in an email that if you don't have, I can send out. And obviously we talked about thoughts around masking and implemented the notion that masks are required in schools. That pretty much sums it up, I'd say.
And then we also talked about the FNESU, the K through 5 literacy kind of instructional framework for the year. But that was about it at that meeting. So let's see, our next meeting is October 6th. I did want to broach the subject if we'd like to talk about whether return, now that we are in person, although obviously we have some virtual component that we are keeping, but would we prefer to move the meeting time back to 6:30, which historically has been our meeting time, does seem to afford a little bit more grace with the transition from one's work day to the meeting, especially once we're contending with winter roads. So just wanted to have a discussion, hear people's thoughts on whether we might like to transition back to a 6:30 meeting time or keep it at 6.
I'm not opposed to moving it. Probably work better for me.
I agree with that. John, how about you? Would a 6:30 work? And principals, how do you feel about a shift to 6:30? It kind of neither here nor there for you? Okay. And Lynn, how does that resonate with you? That's okay?
I think 6:30 is fine.
Kat?
I'm good either way, 6:30 is good.
Okay. Do you think we need a motion?
Yes.
Okay, so I will make that motion. Moving forward, starting at our October 6th meeting, the start time will be 6:30. By roll, Kat?
Aye.
Lisa? Aye. Miranda? Aye. John? Aye. Emily?
Aye.
Mary is an aye. I have nothing under other. Anyone have anything else they'd like to discuss? All right, so then I
Mary?
just, oh, yeah.
Sorry, I'm sorry. I know it's, you're ready to adjourn, but I'm realizing we didn't give Gab any opportunity to check in with the board if there was any questions or any comments that Gab wanted to make in terms of the Flexible Pathways Academy.
Oh, yeah, I think it would be great. I didn't see her on my agenda. I feel as though we should maybe have her listed on the agenda for principals moving forward. And yes, Gab, it would be great to hear how that is, how that's going.
Sure. Am I a different board now because it's K6?
No, so Gab is actually technically going to usually be at our SU because it's an SU program. So her reports will come at that level, but she is sometimes joining the local board. She won't be at all of them, but she's choosing to join. So I just thought since she's here, maybe she could give a quick update so folks know where we're at with that. And
Yes. Can you all hear me okay?
Yeah.
We had a great first week. I think it was really chaotic with all the technology and getting people on meetings, and people did great, and we got lots of good feedback from parents, and kids seem really happy and excited. We have amazing attendance. It was like 100% attendance the first 3 days, and then we've had like only excused absences for, kids who have the stomach bug, and it's been really good. So we had a great first week, and we're doing lots of planning. So we are having lots of technology issues, but we're working through them. I do, yeah. Let me. We are at 27. 27. Yep.
And Gab, that's K through 6?
Okay, so actually, sorry, it's 24 K through 6. We now have 2 7th graders and 10 high school students.
The board probably does not know yet that we were able to find a way to make an offering for our middle school students, for our 7th and 8th graders. We couldn't staff it because of the licensure requirements, but we did. Gab, I'm not going to remember the name of it. Do you want to just talk briefly about that?
Sure. We're using a platform called EdOptions that Rutland's also using. And it seems slightly more engaging than VTVLC. And so we're using that option, but it's very similar. It's very self-paced, and but there are live teachers and live meetings that we do not provide.
And are the high school students under the VTVLC program?
No, they're not. They're doing something called Flexible Pathways Academy, which is something that Enosburg's been doing for about 4 years now. And it's a little bit complicated to explain, but it allows students to get their proficiencies in a multitude of ways. They can take in-person classes, they can take online classes, or they can do projects, they can work. There's a variety of ways that they can demonstrate their learning. We gained a couple new tuition students from that.
Great. Awesome, that's great. Thanks so much, Gab. I appreciate the update. I'm glad it's off to a good start. I hope you iron out the tech stuff. I'm sure it'll all smooth out with time. All right. Anything else, folks? So a motion to adjourn.
I'll make that motion.
All right, thanks, Emily. Kat?
Aye.
Lisa? Miranda? John? Emily?
Aye.
And Mary is an aye. Thank you all.